Welcome to the 167th broadcast of the t-roh show. This is part 6. Been doing is going over the law of nations. I've got some extra information that was sent to us to show us how the U.S. sees it. But funny enough, the U.S. Its point of view was interpreted by a bar attorney. So that tells you something right there. But it's very enlightening, and I'm going to read that in a minute. Today we're going to be talking about of the sovereign, his obligations and his rights. Maybe 38, this chapter 4, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about American citizenship and how that operates, and as to why so many people are confused. So let's get to that first. We'll get that straightened out. This was by John S. Wise of the New York Bar. Okay, this is the library, Long Island, New York, blah, blah, blah. Now, what we want to do is go into page 3 because it's going to give you a definition of citizenship. So let's do that now. Let me stop sharing. Okay, here we go. Now, this is a lawyer's point of view. Realize what's going on here. A lawyer wrote this. I think it was 1905. Listen to this carefully. It says the latest approved definition of the term citizenship is that found in the Standard Dictionary 1898, which describes it as the status of a citizen with its rights and privileges. The status of a citizen implies the existence of a political body established to promote the general welfare and collective, as well as individual rights of those composing it. Okay, so a political body established to promote the general welfare and collective, as well as individual rights of those composing it. Now, the other one is individuals who have established or submitted themselves to the dominion of that political body, which means you're a signatory to it. You sign its constitution, and you sign the social compact that created it. You sign the constitution of it, and you're a part of it. That's it. It's real simple. Such a benefit from or participation in, and I'm going to show why people can't do that here. Okay, why they haven't, that's never been given to them. In participation in the administration of that political body by the individuals composing it, that they may be designated as citizens and as not mere subjects or of a despot or an absolute monarch under whom they have no choice in administration. So the same authority above quoted defines a citizen as a member of a nation or sovereign state. Don't listen carefully, okay? So listen carefully here. Don't zone out on me, all right? Because this is going to get to something and this is going to answer all your questions. The same authority above quoted defines a citizen as a member of a nation or a sovereign state, especially a republic. Remember that, okay? This is a republic right here. It didn't say anything about Republican, all right? One who owes allegiance to a government is entitled to protection from it. Now, that definition is broad enough to make every subject a citizen of the government to which he owes allegiance and from which he receives protection. Okay? Now, this gets even deeper. But the term citizen, as it is commonly understood, implies membership of a political body in which the individual enjoys popular liberty. Listen to this again. But the term citizen, as is commonly understood. Now, how does this lawyer know what's commonly understood and what isn't? That's how lawyers get a hold of your brain, okay? Implies membership of a political body in which the individual enjoys popular liberty to a greater or less degree. It does not necessarily follow this definition that the grade or quality or privileges of citizenship must be identical to all citizens, even in republican governments. Now, so now you know there is a difference between a republican, of which it states that, oh, every state that comes to this union is guaranteed a republican form of government. It's not a republic. People get that mixed up, and we keep trying to tell them over and over again. It's a republic that you're looking for. A federal republic is those where the states were independent and sovereign states that came together. A Republican is a whole different animal. It means they have power of attorney to speak for you. The only time you get to speak is every 4 or 6 years. That's it, through a vote, which is the suckiest type of freaking situation you've ever seen, because it allows a private membership association to commit capital crimes by coming in and taking over your judicial branch. Okay. So, identical to, in all citizens. So it says it does not necessarily follow from this definition that the grade or quality or privileges of citizenship must be identical to in all citizens, even in Republican governments, which means it's not going to happen. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you and what I'm about to read to you. In the Roman government, a citizen might or might not be vested with all the civil privileges of the government. In many cases arising under our system, it has been repeatedly decided that the bestowal of political privileges upon an individual is not essential to constitute him a citizen. Hello. In the Roman government, a citizen might or might not be vested with any civil privileges of the government. Okay. Now, if you can get, you know, tried as a become a felon, you lose your privilege to vote, and that privilege can be bestowed back to you or given back to you. They can't take a right. The right's never able to be taken from anybody. Okay, they can stop enforcing them, but it doesn't mean that they've been taken away. So, in the Roman government, a citizen might or might not be vested with all civil privileges of the government. Okay, in many cases arising under our system, is dealing with the United States, it has been repeatedly decided that the bestowal of political privileges upon an individual is not essential to constitute him a citizen. It has been repeatedly decided that the bestowal of political privileges upon an individual is not essential to constitute him a citizen, which means you can be a citizen and have zero political privileges within a Roman system. And that's what you have today. Which means they can call you a citizen all day long. However, you have no political rights whatsoever, which means that allows two 527 organizations, private corporations, to exist called Republicans and Democrats, wherein somehow they got everybody's political privileges given to them. Now, my guess is that it was given to a Senate, which I'm going to read in the Law of Nations in a minute. It was given to a Senate under a Roman type republic, which is an aristocratic republic. It's a Roman type republic, and then that through the Senate, it was bestowed upon two private companies, 527 corporations, Republicans and Democrats, and that's why they can't get rid of each other. Okay, just like like Schiff lying his butt off. Okay, he lied and all that stuff. I think Nadler threatened the Supreme Court yesterday or the day before, based on a decision they might or might not have made. And I believe since he's a senator, they can't touch him because he's got all the political power. And I believe that's why Hillary went to become a senator after she they got an office to get away from all the crimes that she had been committing. And I think that's why they don't put her in jail. They sure would like you to think they're going to put her in jail, okay? But they're not. So you have a Roman type system. It's a Roman government. That's in the United States. You don't have a republic. You never had one. And a republican is a type of government is the same as a Roman type government. Just name something differently. Just name it Republican. They put the word "an" on the end of it, or the letters "an." That's it. So that's what you got. And this is coming from a lawyer, not me. I'm just reading it. So let's get on to the other part of this. which is dealing with the law of nations. Let me get this taken care of here. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so here we go. This is chapter 4 of The Sovereign, His Obligations, and His Rights. The reader cannot expect to find here a long deduction of the rights of the sovereignty and the functions of a prince. And believe it or not, with a republic actually starts out as a part of the people. They just hand it all over to one guy. So just realize that. So people that are calling themselves kings and queens in this country, hilarious, by the way. That is funny. Okay. Now, these are to be found in treatises on the public law. In this chapter, we only propose to shew, in consequence of the grand principles of the law of nations, what a sovereign is, and to give a general idea of his obligations and his rights. We have said that the sovereignty is that public authority which commands in civil society and orders and directs what each citizen is to perform to obtain the end of its institution. This authority originally and essentially belonged to the body of the society, to which each member submitted and ceded his natural right of conducting himself in everything as he pleased, according to the dictates of his own understanding, and of doing himself justice. But the body of the society does not always retain in its own hands this sovereign authority. Frequently entrusts, or it frequently entrusts it to a senate or to a single person. That senate or that person is then the sovereign. Now, do you get why Hillary went on to become a senator? Because she had committed so many crimes. I mean, actually, Alexa has her listed as a serial killer. Over 100 people have killed her, or she's killed, or connected to. But she was a part of the Senate, and once she was a part of that Senate, they can't touch each other, so she can't be tried. In the event, it is evident that men form a political society and submit to laws solely for their own advantage and safety. Okay, so the laws today are not to anybody's advantage and safety. What they are is they are to punish. The laws are there to punish people constantly. They're not to your advantage at all, if anybody knows that. Okay, not to your advantage at all. It's always to your detriment. The sovereign authority is then established only for the common good of all citizens. So therefore, a law and submit to laws solely for their own advantage and safety. So what they're saying is that if you do not allow the Republicans and Democrats to take more rights from you, then you're a domestic terrorist. They're not to your advantage, so why you don't have the right, or you don't have to submit to them if they're not to your advantage. It's real simple. It says the sovereign authority is then established only for the common good of all the citizens. Okay, so in this country, we have what they call an alien tort claim. All right, so you could use that sentence right there and say and argue that that law is not to your advantage. If it's not to your advantage, you don't have to follow it, because that's what the law of nations says. That's a violation of law of nations. U.S. District Court has original jurisdiction in their system, in the Roman government, Roman system, um, to hear alien tort claims. All right. If it's not to the common good, it's just ridiculous, and it would be absurd to think. So basically, establish only for the common good of all the citizens. There you go. All right. So you can't have one group that has more rights than all the others. So these special groups that they're forming, they're saying they're under special protections and all that stuff. Those are illegal to have. You can't do that. It's illegal to do that. So, and it would be absurd to think that it could change its nature on passing into the hands of a senate or a monarch. Okay. So flattery, that means it doesn't change. In other words, and it would be absurd to think that it could change its nature on passing into the hands of a senate or a monarch. So if a political society can't do this for them to themselves, then neither can a senate or a monarch. So What is it? The Senate has broken in the Roman government. The Senate has violated its authority. But who's going to go after them when they're protected by a bunch of lawyers? Who's going to be able to do anything? Plus, remember that Hillary is also an attorney, so they would have to disbar her in order to be able to charge her with anything. So, don't think that anything's going to happen to the woman. She can't be. That lawyers don't charge other lawyers. Now, flattery, therefore, cannot, without rendering itself equally ridiculous and odious, deny that the sovereign is only established for the safety and advantage of society. Now, a good prince, a wise conductor of society, ought to have his mind impressed with his great truth, with this great truth, that the sovereign power is solely entrusted to him for the safety of the state and the happiness of all the people. That he is not permitted to consider himself as the principal object in the administration of affairs, to seek his own satisfaction or his private advantage. Now, that has really gone. So, what they're saying here is when you're dealing with the thing like Biden and his son, it's not supposed to do that in his private advantage. Even the Senate or any kind of Senate is not supposed to do that. So, when that happens, that's a violation of that office. It's a breach of that office, and that would be a violation of the law of nations. But once again, all the courts are commanded by all their courts are commanded by the Bar Association, which is in complete violation of every bit of that. And yeah, it doesn't work that way, does it? But that he ought to direct all his views, all his steps to the greatest advantage of the state and the people who have submitted to him. What a noble sight it is to see a king of England rendering his parliament an account of his principal operations, assuring that body, the representatives of the nation, that he has no other end in view than the glory of the state and the happiness of his people, and affectionately thinking all who concur with him in such salutary views. Certainly, a monarch who makes use of this language and by his conduct proves the sincerity of his profession is, in the opinion of the wise, the only great man. But in most kingdoms, a criminal flattery has long since caused these maxims to be forgotten. A crowd of servile, courtiers easily persuade a proud monarch that the nation was made for him and not he for the nation, which is what has happened. It happens all the time. He soon considers the kingdom as his patrimony, that is his own property, and his people as a herd of cattle from which he is to derive his wealth, and which he may dispose of to answer his own views and to gratify his passions. Hence those fatal wars undertaken by ambition, restlessness, hatred, and pride. Hence those oppressive taxes whose produce is dissipated by ruinous luxury or squandered upon upon mistresses and favorites. Hence, in fine, are important posts given by favor, while public merit is neglected, and everything that does not immediately interest the prince is abandoned to ministers and subalterns, who can, in his unhappy government, discover an authority established for the public welfare. A great prince will be on his guard even against his virtues. Let us not say, with some writers, that private virtues are not the virtues of kings, a maxim of superficial politicians or of those who are very inaccurate in their expressions. Goodness, friendship, gratitude are still virtues on the throne, and would to God as they are always to be found there. But a wise king does not yield in undiscerning obedience to their impulse. He cherishes them, he cultivates them in his private life, but in state affairs he listens only to justice and sound policy. And why? Because he knows that the government was entrusted to him only for the happiness of society, and that therefore he ought not to consult his own pleasure and use in the use he makes of his power. He tempers his goodness with wisdom. He gives to friendship his domestic and private favors. He distributes posts and employments according to merit, public rewards to services done to the state. In a word, he uses the public power only with a view to the public welfare. All this is comprehended in the fine saying of Louis XII: "The King of France does not revenge the injuries of the Duke of Orleans." So a political society is a moral person, inasmuch as it has an understanding and the will of which it makes use for the conduct of its affairs, and is capable of obligations and rights. When therefore a people confer the sovereignty on any one person, they invest him with their understanding and will, and make over to him their obligations and rights so far as relates to the administration of the state and to the exercise of public authority. The sovereign or conductor of the state, thus becoming a depositary of the obligations and rights relative to government, in him is found the moral person, who without absolutely ceasing to exist in the nation, acts thenceforwards only in him and by him. Such is the origin of representative character attributed to the sovereign. He represents the nation in all affairs to which he may happen to be engaged as a sovereign. It does not debase the dignity of the greatest monarch to attribute to him his representative character. On the contrary, nothing sheds a greater luster on it, since the monarch thus unites in his own person all the majesty that belongs to the entire body of the nation. Now, this reminds me of a time when I was told that people were invited to the house or the castle of the King of the Netherlands, and nobody could speak in the freaking place. You're supposed to go to dinner with him, right? He's inviting to his dinner. You couldn't speak to him unless he spoke to you. So what's the point, right? And I thought, man, what a jackass. Oh, you don't speak to unless the king speaks to you, you don't speak to him. Well, I'll tell you what, kiss my ass, by the way, because he works for me. I don't work for him. That's the point of all this. You see, it says this in the Law of Nations, it always has. So they've used art and they've used Hollywood to turn that crap around to where everything is easy for you, but those are just what you need to be able to run the state and do all that. You don't have time to sleep, all right? Everybody else, when they're sleeping, they're sleeping. When you're still awake, signing crap, doing this, doing that, you're constantly working. And you're not supposed to bring any of that and start filling up your own pockets with it. That all belongs to the people. So there's a whole messed up thinking of what a king and a queen is. It's horrible, and it's just, it's evil. They've corrupted themselves. So the King of the Netherlands, he's corrupted himself. He went and followed his mom's example, which was a horrible example, by the way. It says the sovereign, thus clothed with the public authority, with everything that constitutes a moral personality of the nation, of course, becomes bound by the obligations of that nation and invested with its rights. So, does the king or queen have any time going to sit there and abuse his own people and do all this other crap? No, he does not. He's in dereliction of duty when he does that, and that's why a lot of them hung and they chopped their heads off and stuff. It's this kind of crap that they do. All that has been said in Chapter 2 of the general duties of a nation towards itself, particularly regards the sovereign. So when you have people going around and go, I'm sovereign. No, you're not. That's not how that works. And now you see how far off people are when they start claiming that they're sovereign. He is the depositary of the empire and the power of commanding whatever conduces to the public welfare. He ought, therefore, as a tender and wise father, and as a faithful administrator, to watch for the nation, to take care to preserve it and render it more perfect, to better its state, and to secure it as far as possible against everything that threatens its safety or its happiness. It's a very simple job to do, and they don't get it. It becomes, it's when they start corrupting themselves. It's horrible. It's horrible to watch. It says, hence all the rights which a nation derives from its obligations to preserve and perfect itself and to improve its state. And of this book, all these rights, I say reside in the sovereign, who is therefore indifferently called the conductor of society, superior prince, and blah blah blah. We have observed above. What they don't realize is when they're putting all these titles and crap on them, they're not. The prince himself thinks that they're saying it about him, and they're not. They're just he's a mirror image of them. So they're saying that they're complimenting themselves. But princes and kings and stuff, they're kind of stupid. They believe it. They believe it pertains to them. They don't realize that they're not praising him. They're praising the state in which he administers. So it's just silliness. That's all it is. We have observed above that every nation ought to know itself. This obligation devolves on the sovereign. Uh, now realize this. You'll realize that America doesn't really have a character. That's what's missing. We don't really have traditions and things like that. It doesn't know itself. It doesn't have, what do we do here? What do we do there? They're constantly virtue signaling. That's cool, but it's stupid. But whatever. They're constantly virtue signaling and all that. But America doesn't have a character. No basic traditions that everyone in the country recognizes. Christmas is not even really recognized, or Thanksgiving is not really recognized as something that's normal throughout the whole country. The family fights is pretty much recognized throughout that time, but through those times, but it's not really a tradition. Okay. One place has horse country. Another one is industrial. Another one does cars. Okay, they build cars, so they're known for what they build or make. And that's pretty much it. And you have Disney World, Disneyland, all those things. But and McDonald's, Burger King, crap like that. But if its country is known for its restaurants, I mean, seriously, and its food, there's not really anything there. Since it is he who is to watch over the preservation and perfection of the nation, the duty which the law of nature here imposes on the conductors of the nations is of extreme importance and of considerable extent. They ought exactly to know the whole country subject to their authority, its qualities, defects, advantages, and situation with regard to the neighboring states, and they ought to acquire a perfect knowledge of the manners and general inclinations of their people, their virtues, vices, talents. All these branches of knowledge are necessary to enable them to govern properly. Okay? So the prince derives his authority from the nation. He possesses just so much of it as they thought proper to entrust with him, or him with. If the nation is plainly and simply invested him with the sovereignty without limitation or division, he is supposed to be vested with all of the prerogatives, without which the sovereign command or authority could not be exerted in the manner most conducive to the public welfare. These are called regal prerogatives, or the prerogatives of majesty. Okay, so let me see how much further we got to go here. All right, let's go. But when the sovereign power is limited and regulated by the fundamental laws of the state, those laws shew the prince the extent and bounds of his power, and the manner in which he is to exert it. The prince, that's called a social compact, by the way. And this is why this was funny. This lawyer, remember the book I was reading from? The lawyer says, "Oh, a social compact is not required." Well, of course, a lawyer is going to say that, because he doesn't want to be restricted. He wants to be able to sue you in every way he possibly can and get your crap legally. All right. The prince is therefore strictly obliged not only to respect, but also to support them. The Constitution and fundamental laws are the plan in which the nation has resolved to labor for the attainment of happiness. The execution is entrusted to the prince. Let him religiously follow this plan. Let him consider the fundamental laws as inviolable and sacred rules. And remember that the moment he deviates from them, his commands become unjust and are but a criminal abuse of the power of which he is entrusted. He is, by virtue of that power, the guardian and defenders of the laws. And while it is a duty to restrain each daring violator of them, ought he himself to trample them underfoot. And this is when we also, once we figured out what was going on, the U.S. Senate just trampled all over everybody's rights. The U.S. Senate is the problem, folks. I'm just letting you know. They grabbed all of your rights, and they've been trampling them ever since. And putting their children in business and, making millions overseas and all kinds of crap. That's what they've been doing. It says that the prince be invested with the legislative power, he may, according to his wisdom, and when the public advantage requires it, abolish those laws that are not fundamental and make new ones. So what we have said on the subject in the preceding chapter 34. But while these laws exist, the sovereign ought religiously to maintain and observe them. They are the foundation of the public tranquility and the firmest support of the sovereign authority. Everything is uncertain, violent, and subject to revolutions. In those unhappy states where arbitrary power has placed her throne, it is therefore the true interest of the prince, as well as his duty, to maintain and respect the laws. He ought to submit to them himself. He finds this truth established in the piece published by the order of Louis the 14th, one of the most absolute princes that ever reigned in Europe. Let it not be said that the sovereign is not subject to the laws of the state, since the contrary proposition is one of the truths of the laws of nations, which flattery has sometimes attacked, and which good princes have also always defended as a tutelar divinity of their states. But it is necessary to explain the submission of the prince to the laws. First, he ought, as we have just seen, to follow their regulations and all the acts of his administration. In the second place, he himself subject in his private affairs to all the laws that relate to property, I say, in his private affairs. For when he acts as a sovereign prince and in the name of the state, he is subject only to the fundamental laws and the law of nations. In the third place, the prince is subject to certain regulations of general polity, considered by state as inviolable, unless he be accepted in the express terms by the law, or tacitly by the necessary consequences of his dignity. I'm sorry, of his, yeah. I hear speak of the laws that relate to the situation of individuals, and particularly of those that regulate the validity of marriages. These laws are established to ascertain the state of families. Now the royal family is that of all the others and most important to be certainly known. But fourthly, we shall observe in general, with respect to this question, that if the prince is invested with a full, absolute, and unlimited sovereignty, he is above the laws, which derive from him all their force, and he may dispense of his own observance of them whenever natural justice and equity will permit him. So it's what you give them, folks, is what we're trying to tell you. It's what you give up. And I'm not advocating for a prince or royalty here in America. It's ridiculous. It's never going to happen. But what I'm saying here is that it's what you give somebody is what they take advantage of. They don't have anything over you unless that of which you give to them. Fifthly, as to the laws relative to morals and good order, the prince ought doubtless to respect them and to support them by his example. But sixthly, he is certainly above all civil penal laws. The majesty of a sovereign will not admit of his being punished like a private person, and his functions are too exalted to allow of his being molested under the pretense of a fault that does not directly concern the government of the state. Okay, here we go. This is back to the Romans again. It is not sufficient that a prince be above the penal laws. Even the interest of nations requires that he should go something further. The sovereign is the soul of the society. If he be not held in veneration by the people, and the perfect security of the public peace and the happiness and safety of the state are in continual danger, which is what's happening today. The safety of the nation, when necessarily, requires that the person of the prince be sacred and inviolable. The Roman people bestowed this privilege on their tribunes, in order that they might meet with no obstruction in defending them, and that no apprehension might disturb them in the discharge of their office. The cares, the employments of a sovereign are much greater importance to those of the tribunes were, and not less dangerous if he be not provided with a powerful defense. It is impossible, even for the most just and wise monarch, not to make malcontents, and ought the state to continue exposed in the danger of losing so valuable a prince by the hand of an assassin. And that's what really happens. Malcontents are what you have today. Those are lawyers that don't follow the law, malcontents, and that's what you've got. And that's why the society is being torn apart, because they have too much power. The monstrous and absurd doctrine that a private person is permitted to kill a bad prince deprived the French in the beginning of the last century of a hero who was truly the father of his people. Whatever a prince may be, it is an enormous crime against the nation to deprive them of a sovereign whom they think proper to obey. So we can go on with this over and over again. This is going to be a long chapter. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and stop it here as far as reading this is concerned. And I was going to show you something else in this book. So it's page 103. This other book, which I thought was interesting. Okay. This is interesting. Some of the stuff that's in there, or look at this. It will be noted that Congress was so doubtful of its own powers. They're talking about the compact between the people and the states. This is so doubtful of its own powers. See, he tries to show people they're so doubtful of their own powers that it made the compact obligatory, not between the United States and the people of this territory, but between the original states and the people. That's how they did that. That was very important back then. It says the radical changes in the form of a federal compact altered the status of the people subject to its jurisdiction, so that whereas they had theretofore been only citizens of the states, they now became also citizens of the United States. The first of these organic changes are the provisions of the Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution, which declared the laws of the United States made pursuant thereto. That all treaties made under its authority to be the supreme law of the land, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. That's when they usurped. That's when they started the usurpation. That was a trafficking of persons, by the way. This is funny. This is what the lawyers say. Formal compact not necessary to create allegiance. You believe that, Laney? That's what the dope said.
Yeah, that's crazy.
All right. It is by no means essential that a formal compact between a citizen and his government shall. I'm sorry, it's going to take a few seconds here because of the exist in order to create a duty of allegiance. If a de facto government is established, listen to this crap coming from a lawyer, okay? There's no backing for this, by the way. If a de facto government is established, overthrowing the supplanting a de jure government, and the citizen remains under the newly established government, I'm going to show you why this is crap. He assumes the duty of allegiance to it, which always exists between the governing and the governed. When a government is changed, those disaffected do not owe immediate allegiance to the changed authority, but should be allowed a reasonable time to depart, and the court and jury should determine what is such reasonable time. Now, okay, let me read this again. I'll show you why this is crap. If a de facto government is established, overthrowing and supplanting a de jure government, the citizen remains under the newly established government. He assumes the duty of allegiance to it, which always exists between the governing and the governed. No. He just said if a de facto government is established, that's called usurpation. That has nothing to do with allegiance. The so-called de facto is usurping the powers of a de jure government, which is kind of like a death offense. You know what I'm saying? That's how that works. Because you're usurpers, mere usurpers in the law of nations. But this is how a lawyer thinks, and this is why it's a disregard of any form of morality, any form of morality whatsoever, because he disregards the de facto's usurpation of a country. And this is what a lawyer does when he knows that he's in the wrong. He ignores the guilty and says, oh, well, you're just subject to this because you put up with it. Oh, I'm sorry, you mean because I didn't shoot you in the head? Is that what you're saying? So if I don't shoot you in the head, this is what lawyers, are telling you. Then I'm subject to you. I don't think so. I think that you're sick in the head and you need some serious help. But I don't need to be turned into a murderer to try to get through your head that you're sick, a very sick people, extremely sick people. And your craft, your witchcraft, and your sorcery, and all these things need to stop. You're capital criminals. You've usurped a judicial branch on behalf of a foreign power. You turn everything. I mean, everything. It was set up like a Roman republic type deal, but that didn't mean you had the right to come in and do it, or to even mess with it, or to even set it up that way and not tell anybody. You told everybody it was a republic. You didn't say it was an aristocratic republic. You didn't say it was a Roman government. You didn't say any of that crap. You just came in, snuck in, and you've been acting like asses ever since. That's just what's been going on. And it's unbelievable how confusing you have made the courts. Confusing you've made. I mean, it's everywhere. All you guys that have gone through law school trying to make a name for yourself, because how do you outshine other lawyers, and how do you end up on TV and everything else to get more clients and crap like that? So you do this outrageous things. You look like a bunch of clowns. But then they go, oh, of dual allegiance. He goes into that in this book. It's funny. Overthrowing and supplanting a de jure government, then this is what a tyrant thinks, okay? In other words, a tyrant comes in, and this is where tyranny comes from. It becomes from lawyers. That's where it happens. If a de facto government is established, overthrowing and supplanting a de jure government, and the citizen remains under the newly established government, no, there is no citizen. Because you just said that the citizen was overthrown. If that's the case, he is no longer a citizen of anything. You made him denizen. You made him stateless. And it says, remains under the newly established government, he assumes the duty of allegiance to it, which always exists between the governing and the government. Governed. No, it does not. It does not always exist between that. When a government is changed, those disaffected do not owe immediate allegiance. They don't owe any allegiance at all, because you had no right to overthrow it. It's even written in the OAS Charter. Aggression gives no rights, and military power and takeover give no rights whatsoever. When you associations came in and you started taking over the judicial branches, which we found in Utah, by the way, where you switched it from 1878 to 1895, 1895 to 1905. What was it, Lanny? 1895?
Yes.
Okay. When you added in the bar in 1895 from the 1878 Constitution, that was a usurpation. It didn't mean that it was okay to do that. Nobody said it was okay. You didn't tell anybody you did it. You snuck in like little weasels, and then just kind of acted like, hey, I'm supposed to be here. No, you're not. And then but from that point, you went into the legislatures, and you started making the laws to benefit you and nobody else. And then when somebody says, screw you, I'm not a part of that deal, it's not going to happen. Oh, we'll just go ahead and murder those guys. Let's murder them, because that's what you're doing. You're murdering them, and then we'll just move on and govern the stupid, the The people that just don't know any better, the ignorant. Okay, that think that they need to go to a lawyer every time they want to change something or do something. You've trained them to do that. Okay, but it still doesn't mean you have any right. It doesn't mean that you have any governing powers. It means nothing. It doesn't mean that you're public officials. You have nothing to do with the public. You're a PMA. You're a club. You're no different than the Playboy Club or any other kind of club that's created. So that's right there, folks, is what you're dealing with. That's a sickness. This is sick. Okay. They go, oh, then in order to hide this crime that you're witnessing here on this page, should be allowed a reasonable time to depart, and a court and jury. Oh, you mean the one that you guys hijacked in this country and didn't allow the people to go to the grand juries anymore, where you hijacked them under your rules, 6 and 7 or 7 and 8. I can't remember which one they are, but they're close. Where only the prosecutor can go to an attorney, a member of the bar, are the only ones that can go to a grand jury. So you see that, folks? They try to give you the appearance right here, in the way that they write, the appearance of following the law, number one, and number two, the appearance of fairness, to justify this type of crap going on here, which is de facto is established and blah, 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 blah. Just in that one paragraph right there, there's like 5 or 6 crimes. Death offenses, by the way. Penalties and everything else. And they just go through it like nothing happened. That's a sick dude. That's a guy that just rapes a woman and says, "Oh, did you have a good time? You want to go out again tomorrow?" While she's sitting there and she's, dabbing the blood off of her forehead because he beat the crap out of her. And all her clothes are ripped and she's crying and all that kind of thing. It's the kind of same thing that you're dealing with right here. And then he turns around and says, "So did you enjoy our date tonight? And did you have fun? And I want to go out again tomorrow." Act like nothing even happened. That's a lawyer. That's what an attorney does. They've been kicked out of every country they've ever been in because of the crap that they do. Because they realize once they get into that position where people fear them, they take advantage of it and they corrupt themselves, just like a prince does. So you kind of get it now, how this all happens and how the corruption begins and ends. And you don't have a federal republic. A federal republic you did have under the Articles of Confederation. You don't have that now. And slowly but surely, regardless of a 10th Amendment or not, the states' rights have been eroding for over 240 years. But they can't do anything anymore by themselves. If they accept any type of federal funding, man, they become federal banker's bitch. That's what they become. And then you'll realize that since it's a Roman type government that they operate in the United States, which is in Manhattan Island, since it's a Roman type thing, and they have a corporation that they operate through to keep themselves at arm's length from the rest of the states. And it's funny, they needed an exit when they did that. So when people catch them doing that, they say, "Well, we just used a corporation. Why you guys didn't realize what we were doing?" They're horrible. It's unbelievable. Everybody has no nationality. There's no such thing as like a U.S. nationality because you got to be a part of the club. That's the way it works. You can't take an oath anywhere. You can't do anything. We checked, by the way. Checked 4 different states. You can't do any of that. So right now, all I can say is it is what it is. We have a federal republic. It is a republic form of government internally, and there's no Republican. So nobody takes power of attorney for you. We have 15 national governments already established with no Senate in there. They're just delegates that people vote in to make laws and stuff. No private companies, no private corporations, never had any of that, okay, as far as operating as the United States of America. So if anybody's ever claiming that, they're a complete liar. All right, just realize that. If you ever hear that we operate as a corporation, that the United States of America, we get operate as a corporation of any kind whatsoever, that's a bold-faced lie. Just remember, just realize that. Anything else? You think anything I forgot?
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
Did it cover everything? Okay. All right. Well, thanks for listening to the 167th broadcast of the t-roh Show, Part 6. We'll come up with some more information because Law of Nations is a very long book, and you can't help but learn something when you read it. This was wisdom that was written back in the 1700s, and it caused the revolution. They've been trying to hide it ever since. A Roman type organization is easier to control. It's more control because the people have a lot less rights. So just realize that there is a way around this. There's no problem fixing it. It's very easy. It's a resident declaration within the United States of America. Very easy to figure out. So anyways, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.